Hello there, welcome back to the Closet Historian. Today I have another sewing project for you all, another retro sewing project. Shocking, I know, coming from me, and today it's going to be a rather simple one. Really easy, if, barely any pattern modifications that I'm going to be doing today to my basic block pattern. Basically, I'm going to be making a v-necked, A-line skirted 1940s inspired dress, very, very similar to this other one I have. This one is in a white eyelet fabric, white cotton eyelet. Today I'll be making nearly the exact same dress in a dusty blue cotton eyelet. So let's get started. We'll jump on over to the blue patterning table of doom as usual. Okay, here we are. Here's the dress I'll be making today. It's virtually a copy of this white eyelet dress that I have had in my wardrobe for a couple of years. I think I made this back in 2018, maybe 2017. I don't really remember. I've had it in my wardrobe for a few years now, and I'm going to be making another one virtually the same in blue eyelet this time, a sort of dusty blue color. You'll see in a second. But basically this is just my basic block pattern with an A-line skirt instead of the pencil skirt, and then just with the v-neck added, and then using a puffed sleeve instead of just the standard smooth capped sleeve. So when it comes to pattern changes, we've got like the least we've ever done on this channel. This is basically just the sloper with the slightest of modifications. So I will show you how we get from the sloper pattern, or how I get from my basic block sloper pattern to this. So I have a tracing of the front 2-dart bodice that I use all the time. So I've just traced that on my alphanumeric paper here. I have my darts drawn in. Nothing has changed with them. My apex is still marked here, but I'm not going to move anything, so I don't even really need it. The only thing I am doing to the front is putting in a v-neck. That's it. So the apex is here. That's what I like to call, like the middle of the bust. That's the level that's at. Choose a point in between of how far you want your v-neck to be. If you want your v-neck to dip all the way down, you can. You can have it be a very slight v-neck if you want. I'm choosing about here in the middle. Again, wherever I put this line in, the actual garment will end a ½ inch in from that, because I'm not going to add on seam allowance to this. I'm just going to have the seam allowance get eaten out of wherever I draw. So I've just chosen this point here, knowing that it will end down here. So I've just drawn from here. I come in from the very, close neck of my sloper, about 1/4 inch, and drawn in that v-neck. I will cut that off. That's all I'm doing to the front. That's it. I'm just adding a v-neck. Then coming over to the back of this pattern for today, I've just traced my bodice block back here, and then the only thing I have to change on the back of this pattern is, because I came in that 1/4 inch on the front neckline, I have to come in that 1/4 inch on the back, and so I just curved that down into this is the center back here, this is my extension for my zipper, into this line here. Again, you kind of want to keep it 90 degrees from where that cuts off. But that's the only change I have on the back. So on the front, I've just gone from my basic block to my block with a v-neck, and on the back, I've just changed it so that it will match up with the front up at the shoulder. See, so that's all I'm doing to the bodice of this. This is a very simple project today. Now for the skirt, how you get an A-line skirt, I have shown here on the channel before how to make an A-line skirt pattern. Basically, you take your sloper or block pencil skirt, which is usually like a straight cut pencil skirt, like a 4-dart pencil skirt. Mine looks like this, it's just got on a fold here, 2 darts up at the top. What you do to turn this into an A-line skirt instead is like we're always doing up here on our bodice, where we close the darts and open up that fullness somewhere else, slash and spread them. You do the same with your pencil skirt pattern. So you take your pencil skirt pattern, and you would slash down from the dart leg to the dart point, dart leg to the dart point, and then if you've drawn a straight line all the way from that dart point to the hem for both of those darts, so you slash up from that line to here, and down along a dart leg to here, and then you swing this dart closed, and it will open up a wedge in the skirt. And same with this one, and that is how you make the A-line skirt pattern. Here is my A-line skirt pattern just here. You can see exactly how that works. So I've just cut those darts and closed them, and that opens up all this wedge of fullness to flare the skirt. So now if I lay my pencil skirt pattern on top of this, you can see that it matches up here at the front, but because this has been closed, it tilts it out that way. This has been closed, it tilts it out that way, so my waist is changed, and then I have this flare added onto my skirt there. So that's how you create the A-line skirt pattern. So you just do that to the front and back of any pencil skirt pattern you have, honestly. If it's a simple pencil skirt with darts at the top, you can make it into an A-line skirt if you want to. All you have to do is just like I said, come up, draw a line from the dart point parallel with the center to the hem, and then slash up from there, slash down in your dart, and close those darts, and that will flare your skirt. So that is how I make my A-line skirt pattern, and therefore I will just use the front and back A-line skirt pattern, and then this little modified neckline version of my block pattern. Then lastly, this is my like basic standard block sleeve that I use, my standard set-in sleeve, and to have it have puff, all I did was take a tracing of this, and again, we're going to be doing some slashing and spreading, down from the center, and I split sort of little lines, I think it came out like 3 inches from the center on each side, and cut a line down to the hem again, and just added in 5/8, 5/8, 5/8, and that is how we add some puff up here. I also did just add on a little bit of extra space up there as well. I have covered how to do puff sleeves before, I think in my white eyelet puff sleeve blouse tutorial, which is one of my first sewing tutorials. I will put a card up to that here now because I do believe I cover how to do a puff sleeve in more thorough detail in that video, but I'll just be using this puff sleeve pattern that I have laying around because I know it fits into my bodice, and so I should have no trouble there. So I have my sleeve pattern, my A-line skirt pattern, and my modified neck of my basic block. That's all the patterning I have to do today to be able to make this dress. Okay, here I am cutting out this pattern out of my blue cotton eyelet here. You can see I have a facing pattern next to me here while I'm cutting out the bodice. And that's because originally I was going to use a facing to finish the neckline of this dress, but then I ended up going ahead and using a lining and fully lining the bodice of this dress. I didn't line the skirt portion, but I did line the bodice of this. I guess I didn't line the sleeves either, but I did finish the hems of the sleeves and the hem of the dress itself with bias tape made out of the same fabric as the lining. But after I had this cut out, I went ahead and serged the raw edges of most of my pieces, but not the bodice pieces because I like to serge them after I sew the darts. So here I am marking the darts on the inside of my fabric. So here I am just marking those darts on the back bodice pieces here, pinching those and pinning that so I can set these aside all next to the machine so I can sew them all at once. So just have those back darts done here. Of course, I'll need to do the darts on my lining pieces as well, which I don't show in video here, but I did the exact same way here, just marking my darts for my pattern piece onto my fabric. Now these are my skirt pieces here. I'm lining up the side seams of my A-line skirt that I'm using for this. I'm just going to go ahead and pin these together. You can see I did go ahead and serge these raw edges here just as a way to prep them, and so I don't have to feel scared about throwing this dress in the wash in the future, because of course with a cotton summer dress I like to just be able to throw it in the machine. Alright, here we are over at my machine. I'm just going to go ahead and sew the darts here on the front of my bodice and on the back, and I tie off my dart points. As you know, if you've been around here for a while, I did have a little bit of trouble with this fabric because it had the thickness of the threads in the eyelet, like the embroidery on this fabric. It made this fabric quite bulky, so it was hard to taper and properly sort of round off the ends of my darts like I would normally like to do, but it'll be okay in the end. If anyone's looking that closely at my darts, they're too close to me, honestly, and you should probably back off. But here I am just tying off the ends of my darts, and then I will go ahead, in the background here we can see actually my sleeves are sitting there, and I will go ahead and just sew those shut while I'm over here. Again, batch processing. So here I am doing that, just sewing the underarm seam, the very short little underarm seam of my short sleeves here. And then I will go ahead and sew the side seams of my skirt as well. And again, as usual, I will say, yes, I do sew over my pins. No, I've never had one injure me. You know, knock on wood, it could happen. Hopefully I'll get it on camera, all for you who like to tell me not to do this. I'm gonna keep, I'll do me, you do you, you know, we'll see. It's fine. Here I am just going ahead and pressing open my A-line skirt side seams here. There we go, just using my tailor's ham whenever there's a curved seam. Just press the front of that skirt a little bit as well, and then here I am just pressing my darts on the front of the bodice. Again, this is the same kind of dart pattern, the same pattern in general I'm using on the lining of this, which is a lightweight cotton in a similar shade of blue, but not the same because I could not find anything quite this shade of blue. It's kind of a weird gray blue color, so it was hard to match to find lining, but again, I would have to do the same darts and pressing for the lining of this as well because it is identical to this outside. So you're seeing the fashion fabric, but I don't show you the lining. I'm actually just pinning those darts where I want them to stay, and then I will go ahead and serge the outside edges of this piece finally to encase these raw edges in thread. I just like to do that once the darts are sewn so that they are less bulky in some ways, you know. It kind of gets sewn, the darts get held down where they need to be in the serger thread, so that kind of helps with that as well. Keep everything smooth, as you can see here. Alright, then I can go ahead and line up my side seams of my bodice here, so that's what I'm pinning here. Just going to do the side seams and the shoulder seams on both sides. For both this outer fabric and for my lining, this will need to be done. Again, lining is done in the exact same way, even though you don't see me doing it here. It's because I hadn't realized I was going to use lining yet. Here I'm blissfully thinking I'm going to use a facing, but this fabric was just too bulky with the thread of the eyelet for a facing to lay nicely with edge stitching and stuff. I just was thinking it wasn't going to work, so that's why I ended up doing a lining instead, by the way. Here I am just sewing the side seams and the shoulder seams real fast here. Not quite this fast in real life. This is sped up a little bit. Wish I could sew this fast, although it didn't take me too long to make this dress. It would have been even faster if I could hit times 300 speed on it, naturally. Back over on the ironing table, I'll go ahead and press open my side seams and shoulder seams that I just stitched, like so. Again, using my tailor's ham where needed. Mostly using it to do these shoulder seams because I don't want to have to move the camera down to the end of the ironing table. So now I have my little sleeves, and for gathering the tops of these, I could take the pattern back over here and mark exactly where I'm supposed to gather between, but I'm not gonna because I'm lazy. So I just kind of marked pins. Like if you fold them out flat like this with the centers lined up, wherever the fold lines are, that's just kind of where I gather to. And actually, because again, this fabric was doing weird bulky things and my machine wasn't having the most fun sewing it, I decided to, instead of use machine sewn gathers, to gather the sleeve caps of these by hand. So I'm just putting in some large gathering stitches with a piece of navy blue thread here actually. The stitch length on my machine only goes up to like 4 millimeters or whatever, and I just felt like it was going to need to be a little bit bigger to properly work with this fabric, so I just ended up doing gathering stitches by hand. I rarely ever do this. It doesn't take that long though, and I did still do 2 lines of gathering stitching, so you see me, this is me putting the first line in, but I am a big fan of having 2 lines of gathering stitches, so here I am going ahead and putting in another right underneath that first one, so that I can gather this the same way I normally would, it's just by hand instead of by machine. And I'm just leaving these tails, untied at the end so I can pull them and scooch the fabric along however I need to in the end. And then I will go ahead and set these sleeves aside for now, and then I will work on the bodice some more. I'm going to go ahead and attach the lining to the outside by pinning it along the neckline here. So I'm attaching that at the shoulder seams first, pinning that into place, and I'm going to leave myself about 1.5 inches of free space back here because eventually I'm going to put the zipper into just the fashion fabric, and then I will hand stitch the lining down along the inside for a clean finish. Sometimes I attach the lining, like kind of flat line the pieces, and sometimes I do it this way. Just depends on how I'm feeling on the day, honestly. But here I am pinning along the back neckline, and I'm using my pressing board here to go ahead and make everything lay nicely along the front V-neck here, and then I can go ahead and sew the lining to the fashion fabric right sides together along the neckline here. And you can see me doing that here. Of course, when I get down to that point of the V-neck, again, I leave the needle down, pick the presser foot up, turn my project, and then put everything back down and keep sewing. That is how I like to sew corners, points. But just go ahead and sew that with my same, always 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, not all the way to the end there because I'm going to need that room to put in the zipper and finish everything in the end. Here I am just clipping the V of the neckline, and then in the back where my neckline is curved, I'm going to put some clips into that as well. I always clip my curves, so that's what I'm doing here. And then I can go ahead and take this back to the machine and do some edge stitching, which is where you just kind of put, it's done on the inside of the project, or the wrong side I guess, and you just push all of the seam allowance over to one side and sew it down to the lining. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you can kind of tell what I mean when you see it over on the machine. But this just is a line of stitching holding the seam allowance excess down to the lining side, and it helps you can see here, I have everything, all the seam allowance pushed over to the left here. And then I'm just sewing a line of stitching on top of it really close to the original seam line. This just holds everything down and smooth when I go ahead to press the neckline over. Edge stitching really helps in this kind of an area like a neckline. I try and use it unless it's impossible for some reason, unless I've shaped the neckline in a way in which it makes it impossible. Alright, so here I am. You can kind of, if you're looking closely, see that there's a line of stitching there. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a press and a little bit of steam so that my lining is all nice and finished up at the neckline area. All right, bringing my sleeves back over, I can go ahead and put these into my bodice now. Again, the lining is only attached at the neckline right now, so I have my my underarm, the top of the side seam is what I'm trying to say. I have the top of the side seams of the lining and the bodice pinned together so that they are matched up, and I'm just going to be sewing the lining to the bodice as I said in the sleeve. Again, hopefully you can tell what I mean by that. Gosh, I feel like I'm very confusing today. But here I am setting my sleeves in. Again, I have those gathering threads so I can pull them so that I can concentrate the gathering up near the shoulder seam up here. So here I am just moving that gathering around until I like what I see. Basically centering it around the shoulder seam there. That's what that seam is. Underneath my hand is the shoulder seam up there. So I'm centering my gathering up around the shoulder seam, of course, so that I have puff at the top of my sleeve. I don't need puff at like the side or the underarm of my sleeve. I just want it at the top, at the sleeve cap area. And then I'm just pinning the rest of the sleeve in here. Again, on most like commercial patterns or like real legitimate patterns, not made by me, there will be like notches where you can match up exactly, so your gathering is exactly the same on either side. And like the notch on the sleeve matches the notch on the bodice piece, but this is me we're talking about. So I just kind of eyeball it and move the gathering around as I see fit. You know, I am, especially when it comes to like a simple project like this, where I'm not trying to be very, you know, couture about it. I just am doing what feels best. But here I am, having my sleeve all set in, all gathered up using those hand-stitched gathering threads, and then I will go ahead and sew it into the bodice. So here I am over on the machine, sewing this on. Another thing to note here is that I should have serged the raw edge of the lining fabric at this arm opening, and I did not. I don't know why I forgot, but, you know, now it's just a little bit, you know, at risk of coming apart after repeated washings and wearings. But luckily for me, I'm not very hard on my clothes, so it should stand the test of quite a while for me. Back over on the ironing table, I'm going to go ahead and line up the bodice onto the skirt now. You can see that although I have started attaching the lining, I have it out of the way while I'm doing this. I'm just attaching this with the fashion fabric, especially because I do not have a lining for the skirt in this instance. You could, again, sew the lining to the skirt here as well, if you're like more like flat lining it, if you so desire. I don't know. It's hard to come back here and explain why I do the things that I do. I just, you know, do what I feel, again, is right at the time. So here I'm just sewing the skirt onto the fashion fabric, and then I will tack the lining down at the side seams later and then leave it pretty much free otherwise, which I guess does make it easy to come in here and alter things later if I needed to. Here I am sewing the skirt and the bodice together at that waist seam. You can see here everything is serged finished so that those edges won't fray. You could of course finish things with hem tape or by using French seams as well. Not hem tape, but like rayon seam binding is what you can use hem tape as well, but rayon seam binding is a bit softer. But I just serged them because, again, quick. I like quick and easy. All right, so now my skirt and my bodice are attached. You can see the lining is hanging in here like loosely, like so, for now. But I will go ahead and sew the center back of my dress closed as a guideline for putting in my zipper. So I'm going to pin the center back of my dress closed. You can see here. And yes, I do have a lot of ease in the center back of my skirt pattern. It's just something that's been there for a while and I'm just used to dealing with it. So like at the top of my dress, I'll sew this back with the 5/8. Like the center back is 5/8 in from the edge here, but down here it's like 1.5 inches in. That's just how my patterns are. I made that decision, you know, back in like 2017 or something, and I don't remember why, but here I am just pinning the center back of my dress closed, and then I will take the zipper and hold it up to the dress in just a minute here to see where it ends. And so from where that zipper ends, I will put an extra pin just here. I'm putting an extra pin down at the end of that. And so from above that pin, I will sew right here. You see me sewing with a size 4 largest stitch length. And then from below that pin, I will sew with a proper stitch length, something nice and small. And I do taper my seam allowance. It's hard to explain, but like because I know I have all this extra space in the back here, you can kind of see where the iron is now to where it is in the bottom of the corner. The seam allowance goes from wide to thinner. I just go ahead and ease my seam allowance shorter while I'm sewing. This is, you know, it's not something you have to do. It's just something I'm doing because I have the space there and it gives me a tiny bit of flare at the back, center back skirt seam, I guess. but it's just a quirk of my pattern that the back seam allowance there is so thick, so I might as well just like taper it out and use a little bit of that. But after I have the center back of my dress closed up, with those two different stitch lengths, basically a proper seam from the zipper down and a basting stitch from the zipper up, I can go ahead and pull those threads out. So that's what you see me doing here. And then I can pin the right hand side, as I'm looking at it, of my dress onto the zipper right next to the teeth. I have that nice folded edge from being able to press that seam open and then take the seam out. I've shown how I do my zippers here on my channel before. I included it this time just because I'm probably doing a poor job of explaining it, but just explaining it again in case people haven't seen how I do it or want to know how I do it, I guess. And then here I have already stitched that other side down, so now I'm lapping the left side of the zipper, again, that folded edge from having sewn that seam earlier, down over the zipper teeth, and then I pin it in place, and then I sew with just my regular presser foot with the needle moved over all the way, and that presser foot's pressed up next to the zipper teeth, and then I'm just sewing along that lapped side to keep it stitched down, basically. And that's just how I do my zippers. It's not probably the correct way, but again, when have I ever really, I don't tend to care usually if something is the best or correct way. I just care that it gets done. All right, here I am just finagling the top of that, stitching it down, and my zipper is in. So now I'm going to fold down the lining on the inside here, and then I will hand stitch it down onto that zipper so that as everything is nice and clean in the back, and where the zipper is attached, I guess, to the garment in the back is clean, finished, and smooth. You can see me folding over the top here and folding that lining inside, like so. And I will just pin this so it's all correctly in place along the zipper, and then I will hand stitch it down, which I will show you in just a moment as well. And I will also, while I'm over there hand stitching, tack down the lining at the side seams to the side seams of the fashion fabric as well. All right, sitting over at my desk here, I'm just stitching that lining down, or slip stitching it down to the zipper so that it is invisibly cleanly finished in there. And then I will go ahead and sew a hook and eye at the top of my zipper area as well here to hold this dress properly closed. And then I'm going to hem my sleeves and my dress both with some bias tape. So this is just bias tape made out of the same cotton that I used to line the bodice of this dress. I just made some double fold bias tape out of that, and I am pinning it all along the hem of my sleeve here. I will sew that on with a 1/2 inch seam allowance as usual, and then I will turn it onto the inside, pin it again, and hand stitch it down for an invisible from the outside finish. And it's nice and clean on the inside. I love finishing sleeves and, well, necklines and hems, especially with bias tape like this. It's my favorite way to finish a hem that has a shape to it. If a hem is just straight across, then yeah, turn it up a couple of times. But if a hem has any sort of curve to it, like for an A-line skirt or for a circle skirt, you will catch me using bias tape to finish it. So here I am stitching that on, and now that it's on, I can go ahead and fold that bias tape onto the inside. Oh, maybe I forgot to mention I sewed that bias tape onto the right side of the fabric, and now I am turning it into the inside, pinning it, and then I will hand stitch it down, which is exactly what I will do to hem this dress as well. But I do not show that, for it is the same technique, and I have shown how I hem with bias tape, I do believe, here on the channel before. I even have a video all about like seam finishes, and I talk about how I use this technique for hemming. But again, a long stitch into the bias tape there, a short stitch into the fabric, and that is exactly how I hem both these sleeves and the hem itself. And then this dress will be all finished. And with my dress here finished, I thought I would style it a couple of different ways for you again, since people seem to like that in my last video. And I did include some reference images in my last video as well on how to style things for daywear in the 1920s, so I will do the same here for some 1940s summer daywear. Here are a couple of pages from one of my Montgomery Ward's catalogs. This is one of my 1943, a copy from 1943, I suppose. I say they're my catalogs. They're Montgomery Ward's catalogs. I just happen to own a copy and have scanned a lot of them. And you can find those on my Pinterest page. But here's a page talking about different eyelets available that you could buy to make dresses out of. They did sell fabrics as well. And then here's a page showcasing some of the dresses, and I'm sure these accessories were also available. And you can see how this eyelet dress in the center here was styled with black accessories, shoes, belt, and a bracelet, and then a matching eyelet hat here, which is very fun. But here are some examples of 1940s styling. These are, I'm sure, split all over the different parts of the 40s. The 40s, again, is a 10-year period of time. Things were styled differently in the beginning of the decade as to the end of the decade. Things were styled differently depending on how formal they were, where you lived. Like if you lived in New York City, you probably were styling things different than if you lived in, like, you know, the middle of nowhere, Kansas. So we see some actresses here and some everyday people here. But on the right hand side of the image here, we see Rosalind Russell wearing a fun checked dress, and she's got a black hat, belt, shoes, and handbag, matching accessory set. You know how I'm all about that. And she does seem to have a floral corsage and then a white glove paired with this. So both black and white accessories paired with this, but the black or the darker accessories, they could be dark green for all we know, this is a black and white picture, are interspersed from her hat, belt, and then handbag, and then shoes, so that it breaks the outfit into fourths and has one of those dark accessories at each of those levels, which just provides a certain level of balance to an outfit, which I always appreciate. I always talk about matching accessory sets here on this channel. You know, if you've been around, that I'm way into it, so that is shown here in this image. And in the next image to the left here, we have a group image. People seem to be standing in front of some sort of building here, but I just really liked this image because it showed the variety of different hat styles that were worn for day wear in the 1940s. I was trying to find images that were more, you know, summer styling, and this seems to be spring summer to me. No one's wearing a big overcoat or anything, but you can see, you know, bigger hats, close, smaller hats, hats tipped forward on the head, hats on the back of the head. There are a lot of different hat styles in the 1940s, in the 1930s as well. Hats really kind of took off in the 30s and became all kinds, like, not that they weren't popular beforehand, they were, but they were much more monolithic, whereas in the 30s and 40s, there were lots of different styles available every season. So it wasn't like, ooh, this style was in 1943, and then this style completely shifted, and by 1944, it was more just like there was a bunch of different styles available every single season from your Montgomery Awards for sure, and from your local milliner as well. And again, we can see some coordination here, although a little bit less. Some of these ladies have gloves with them, some are wearing gloves, some are not. And, you know, you will see people who are not wearing hats sometimes as well. But definitely some cute two-toned shoes going on here. And that's always nice. And speaking of two-tone shoes, the next image to the left here, we have a lovely couple here. And again, I just wanted to showcase how she has her matching accessories across this outfit here. We have the ivory or white at the shoe, in the handbag, and in the gloves. So it's like balancing, and with a pearl necklace actually. So it balances this accent color up the outfit. And I just think that matching accessories always lend such a nice harmony to outfits, and clearly this gal agrees. And she's got a floral corsage also pinned at the waist of this dress, and I always like a floral corsage either up on the kind of shoulder or at the waist, or you can of course pin flowers onto your hat, onto your handbag, but pinning millinery flowers onto your outfit was actually quite common, as opposed to just pinning them onto your hat. And you can still find vintage millinery flowers available online, because modern silk flowers are usually very like plasticky, but vintage ones are usually made of finer fabrics and are not too much more expensive, so it's worth looking for vintage millinery flowers online. And the last image here on the far left, this seems to be a much more glamorous publicity photo, possibly from Hollywood. I don't know who this is because, well, I don't know who any of these people are except for Rosalind Russell, because I have seen some of her films, but I don't actually watch a lot of old Hollywood, so I'm sorry if this is someone incredibly famous and I just don't know, just because I haven't watched a lot of old Hollywood films, unfortunately. But she's got this white and black, I assume black dress on. It could be navy, could be dark green. Again, we have no idea. It's black and white. But again, notice the matching shoes, handbag, gloves, and hat, all helping harmonize with this outfit. Of course, this is pulling an accent color from this dress, I'm sure. Although, if this dress, let's say, had a red print on white and then all the accessories were in navy, I still think this would be, you know, very cute. You can use an accent color that is not in the print at all in something like this. But again, notice the big clutch handbag as well. I always love a large clutch handbag, and you would, I guess I didn't think when I first started wearing vintage that in the 1940s they would have giant clutch handbags. It seems like kind of an 80s thing, but they definitely had them, and that means that you can get away with using 1980s giant clutch handbags with your 1940s outfits, which I can always appreciate because it's much cheaper to collect 80s accessories than it is to collect accurate or like actual 1940s ones. So firstly, I wanted to try styling my new blue eyelet dress with all ivory accessories here. So these are some actually late 30s, early 40s accessories mostly going on here, in amongst new things and modern things. So this hat is actually a late 30s, early 40s hat that I picked up on Etsy. It is a vintage hat. I got it for such a deal. I think this hat was $25 if I remember correctly, and I remember being shocked by that because it, in my opinion, is so lovely. And then this handbag I picked up for $12 at an antique store. A lot of times you will see wooden bead handbags like this labeled as being from the 1970s because people think wooden beads, they think 70s, but were also around in the 30s and 40s, and that is when this one with the celluloid chain and clasp is from. So I got quite the deal on this. You can kind of score a deal on things when people don't actually know what decade they're from and price them as if they're from the 70s when they are not. And then I have a 1980s belt. That is a nice covered buckle belt that works well for multiple eras, I think. And again, that was another Etsy find. And then a vintage 1940s brooch and Remix retro shoes here. These are Remix vintage ivory leather pumps that work for both the 40s and the 50s in my opinion. Then of course I had to pair this with some red accessories because I just love pairing almost anything with red accessories. So here's my red accessories set paired with this blue dress, this dusty blue dress. I have some vintage millinery silk poppies pinned on up on my shoulder here, and then a big, of course, giant red straw hat that I picked up on eBay. This one is again from the 1930s or 40s. This is a Plastiflex clutch from the 1940s. This is one of my more expensive Plastiflex clutches. An investment for sure, but it was just so fabulous. Again, this is a 1980s belt, and this time in red suede. But again, covered buckle belts were such a thing and are really kind of hard to find in general. So if I can find them from the 80s, I snap them up. Then I have a 1940s or 50s cotton glove with this, and bait footwear sandals. And then lastly, I wanted to pair this blue dress with navy blue accessories here, but I chose my multicolored navy blue accessories. So my multicolored shoes, and pairing that with my multicolored cord clutch here as well, pulling the green out of both the shoe and the clutch for my gloves, pinning on another millinery flower, and then this 1940s hat here. This is another genuine 1940s hat that I picked up on Etsy for only like $35. And this hat is another example of how 1940s hats I can find much easier and for much less of a investment than a 1920s hat like I was talking about last time. 1920s replica hats often I feel miss the mark for me, or don't look quite as accurate, and then the real ones are much heftier investment than these nice little 40s ones that I can find for under 40 bucks. So I hope you enjoyed watching how this dress came together and how I plan on styling it in my wardrobe. It just goes to show that if you have a basic block pattern, like it's a lot of work to get that down, but once you have one, it's so easy to make really simple, like 1940s looking projects from the basic two-dart bodice kind of and skirt pattern set. So I really recommend buying a block pattern or making a block pattern from scratch. However you have to achieve one, going to a tailor and having them make you one. Having a basic block that fits you just opens up so many doors. So it's a major advantage to have in your sewing room, and I highly recommend it, as we know. But thank you as always for watching today, and I will see you again soon. Bye.